Hello, everyone. My name is Madlena Ivanova, and I'm the Stanford Ambassador for Women in Data Science. So today I have the pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is dear to my heart, Bhavana Bartholf. She is a Chief Transformation Officer for Microsoft USA, driving $46 billion business with more than 9,800 people. She directly reports to the COO with direct accountability to the president of Microsoft US. She is responsible for building and landing the transformation strategy to accelerate the evolution and shift Microsoft sales, marketing, and customer success business needs. Bhavna has served in many leadership roles over the past 20 years at Microsoft with responsibility across customer success and professional services, leading technical teams. She is recognized as a transformational leader, innovative technologist, STEM advocate, and ally for women in racial, ethnic minorities. She has a strong, proven track record for growing female and racial ethnic minorities workforce while promoting diversity and inclusion. She earned her master's degree in engineering from North Carolina State University and bachelor's in science in math, physics, and manufacturing engineering. Bhavna has been a great supporter for the Women in Data Science initiative for 4 years now. I remember when I first asked her to speak at the first event, with such a short notice, she prioritized everything in her busy agenda and made the event such a success. Since then, she has been such a great supporter for our cause at WITS. Bhavna's passion and dedication are truly inspiring and contagious. One is to participate in an event for a cause that you believe in, but it's something else when you're persistent, committed to the community, and striving to make an impact and drive this change of mindset needed to retain females in the field and inspire females to proceed a career in technology. Bhavna, thank you so much for being here today and for your support.
Thanks, Madeline. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Well, I'm super honored and excited to be here. I know it's been a crazy year, especially since we weren't able to do the conference last year. And so a huge shout out to all of our hosts and folks from UNC Charlotte in helping facilitate this event and make it happen. And I'm excited to be here and honored that you guys have given me an opportunity to kind of help kick this off as well. So I wanted to just, I know Madeline took a second to kind of give us a little bit of background on myself. I will say it's an exciting week, at least in my household, because I have 3 little kids and they've officially gone back to school after not being in school for exactly a year. And so this has been a great week for us, and I'm super excited to be here and support this event as well. So what I wanted to do is, if I could ask all of you that are attending, if you can humor me. I know it's weird in a very virtual environment, but I wanted to start off asking you all to do something really simple. I want you to go back to a time when you were a little kid and think about, it could be your happiest moment. It could be a time when you thought you could achieve and do anything. And so if you can think about that point in time, and I'm going to ask for all of you that just joined, I know folks are still joining, if you can take a minute and think about what one of your biggest dreams were. It could be, I don't know, wanting to be Wonder Woman. It could be, you want to be the prime minister, depending on where you were, the president of the United States. It could be you wanted to be a pilot, whatever that is. If you could put that in the chat window for us and remember what I asked you to do, I'll come back to it a little bit later. But think about that time, like when you did dream big, when the world didn't seem like it put you in a box. And I want you to remember how you felt at that point in time. I want you to remember what you were hoping to do. And so I'd love for you to put that in the window and share it with all of your fellow participants that are part of this. And so just to kind of give you a little bit more of a backstory on my end. So as a little girl, I grew up in India with my grandparents. My parents lived in different countries. And I grew up in an environment where gender-specific roles and expectations prevailed. Now, my grandfather obviously didn't conform to those norms. And I will say he did a great job where he taught me to be curious. He taught me to listen, learn, and more importantly, always dream big. And one of the things that he wanted me to really understand is what I thought I can or cannot achieve, was simply a result of limitations that I put on myself. And so if you think about that point in time that I'm asking you all to think about, what changed, right? Life happened, you started becoming practical. People told you could or couldn't do something. And it kind of took that element away. And what's interesting is, Bhavana means imagination. And my grandfather was responsible for naming me. And one of the things he continued to remind me of when I was younger was that, be proud of my name and obviously try to live up to it. And it's about simply imagining what was possible if I challenged status quo. And I will tell you this, this past year, I hit 20 years at Microsoft, as Maddie just called out. And I will tell you, hitting 20 years, it's that point in time when, first of all, you get people telling you you're old. Like you can try to act young as you want right now, but you're old. 20 years, big number. So hitting 20 years, and I was looking at my career. I've had a great career at Microsoft. I've had the opportunity, I'd say in my 20 years to, I think I've had 13 to 14 different jobs, which I know is not the case usually when you've worked in one place for so long. And I've had the opportunity to do different things, from startups within the company to leading new organizations or transforming businesses. And it's been a great ride. And when I reflected on it, I was like, wow, it was great. I have sponsorship, I have support, I've been able to do some great things. But then when I really paused, I realized that somewhere along that journey, I stopped thinking about me. And I was focused on being loyal to the company, doing what people were asking, and it felt great to be wanted. But I didn't realize what that meant when it came to me. And so, you take COVID this year, it kind of gives you a lot of time to pause on everything that's going on. The world has been crazy. And so what I want to be able to do, just to kind of get things started a little bit, is, as I mentioned, growing up with my grandfather, there were so many things that I learned from him over the years, and I'm super grateful that I had that experience. And I know it's a little hard to distill a lifetime of lessons that I've learned from our elders, but what I'm going to try to do today is share 5 transformative things that he taught me that I reflected on, and it was something that I really needed to remind myself at this point in time. Number 1, believe in yourself. And I like to share a little story. I think this seems simple. I know we hear this a lot. We tell our kids or friends, but when it comes to ourselves, sometimes it's a little bit, it's not as easy. When I was growing up and I wanted to learn to drive, I remember letting my grandfather know, like, I want to drive. And the thing that he first brought up was, he's like, happy to let you drive. I'm excited you want to go there, but I want you to change the tire. Now, you have to remember, there was a lot of things going in my mind. That one, we had folks that would help you change a tire. 2, I was like, you never asked my uncle to do that. And my grandfather was like, that isn't the point. I'm asking you, you learn to change that tire, then I'll let you drive the car. And, let's just say through a lot of emotions, it wasn't one of those where I was like, well, why? And why can't someone help me? And he just said, the tools are right there. I'll hang out right here with you, learn to change the tire. I don't know if I actually got to it that day. It took me a little bit to say I'll do it. And he wasn't backing down either. So it was the battle of the wills going on. But when I finally did it, it was one of those where I was like, that wasn't that bad. And then more importantly, what I learned at that moment in time, what he really taught me was that I could actually do it. And he said, I knew you could do it all along, but he said, I needed you to know and believe in yourself that regardless of what someone throws at you, even though in this scenario, it was that one thing you didn't want to do, that you just need to know that you can actually do it if you put your mind at it and you actually, focus on it, you can get anything done. And regardless of what shows up and things that may seem impossible, you have the ability. It's all in you. And that was such a powerful lesson that at that point in time, it gave me confidence. It was kind of, cool to say, because I knew a lot of guys that couldn't change tires at that point in time. And so, but what it taught me was that I really needed to believe in myself. The next lesson is something that I think we all deal with, right? That we're always in the crossroads. We're always in situations where we're having to choose. And, I grew up in India. I was born a Hindu by religion. And I know I'm going into a little bit of a controversial space, but I'll kind of tell you where this is going. And I don't know, I think I was in 5th grade, and I remember my grandfather asking me, so what is your religious belief? And I was like, what do you mean, what is it? What is it? Like, I'm a Hindu, that's what you are, that's what we're all doing. And he was like, no, who said you have to be a Hindu? And I was like, and at that point I was like, why, do I have a choice? I was like, no one actually told me that. Now, it was fascinating to pick a topic like that, with a 10-year-old. And as I was going through this conversation with him, he said, so why do you choose it? And I was like, I have no idea. That's what I've been told. And that's when he said, like, so aren't you curious about what other religions believe in? Aren't you interested in learning? And I was like, sure. So over that summer, and I was with my parents, over the summer we corresponded, and he gave me these abridged versions of different religious books or things associated to that religion. And he was like, and we have a lot of different religion in India and again across the globe. And so I'd say there's like 6 or 7 of them that he'd have me read, and then he wanted me, in my own words as a 10-year-old, write back to him and talk to him about what I learned or what was my takeaway in my limited world of how I understood it. And it was fascinating. At the end of it all, it gave me a little bit of clarity, and I kind of came back to him and I said, this is what I'd like to believe in, and this is my choice. And I was like, I hope someone doesn't get mad. And he was like, no, it is your choice. You always have a choice, and never let anyone tell you otherwise. And so in an environment where that wasn't that's a very controversial topic to go down that path, at least at that point in time, it was a great sense of relief and control that it gave me, that regardless of how bad things may seem or how tough a situation or scenario may be, I always had a choice, and I never wanted to live in fear that I did not. The third lesson that I'd like to share is, it was really about, your experience is your journey. I know we all have had moments in time where we compare ourselves to others. We look at hardships that we may face as, it not being fair or it's not right. And I know there's many environments where I know truly people agree with that. And then there's also, you see people around you, whether you're in a mentorship relationship or whatever that may be, and you assume that that's the only way that I can, go, that's the only road I can take to get to where I'm looking to get to. And the reality of what he wanted me to learn was, my experiences are what makes me who I am. That's what makes me unique. And as women, especially as we celebrate Women's History Month, it's super important to know that those experiences are what makes us strong, that what makes us who we are. And I will say it's been an interesting ride as I've kind of reflected back on my many years of who I was as a kid and where I am today. And I'm super grateful for every experience, whether at a point in time I didn't enjoy the experience and it was frustrating. It created a whole load of emotions that I didn't want to really experience. But I will say today, when I reflect back on it, I'm grateful for it. The fourth one is one of my favorite things, and I did a really good job of it for many years. And I'd say somewhere along the line, I think life happened and I lost sight of it, which is he said, if I lived every day like it was my last, like I had no other choice, like this is all I get. So when I choose to do something, you'll become extremely intentional. Because if you think there's no tomorrow, you're going to make either bold decisions, you're going to seize the day and, seize an opportunity that's right in front of you. And you're really going to take the time to stay positive, to tell your loved ones that you really love them, because we tend to let ourselves get busy and we forget to do those things. And I will say that was one, when I reflected back, that I felt at this stage in my life, it was super important that I needed to remind myself of. And also I think it foundationally, there's that a lot of how we respond and act is out of fear. And when you make these choices with that in mind, you'll realize how much fear doesn't come into the equation anymore, because you get to step out of the light a little, out of the shadows and into the light more. And the last one, I think, it's just, what I've been taught, which is kindness goes a long way. And the reason I want to really reflect on this for a second is I have no issue smiling. That's a big part of who I am. And my grandfather's logic to that was, you never know who else needed that smile. Like your smile could change somebody else's life. And I'll say that I believe in. And so I tell folks, like, really do smile more. Like, the world is not as bad as it seems for you, right? So let's do what we can to make it better. But being kind, when I was thinking about this most recently, I realized it was easy for me to be kind to others, to give people space. I've had to be a little bit more patient and kinder to my kids, especially around everything we're dealing with this pandemic this past year. But the person that I struggled the most to be kind to was myself. And as women, we're used to be caretakers. We are always giving. We're always trying to support, lean in, and help. And we put ourselves last. And I know my husband's a psychologist, and every psychologist and everyone who gives you coaching will tell you to take care of yourself first before you take care of someone else. But it's one of the toughest things for us to do. And some of it is, I feel guilty when I take care of myself. I feel guilty when I prioritize myself. And I'm learning that I think it's okay. I think we've all got to be proud of being kind to ourselves and give ourselves more credit and effort associated to it. And I'm super grateful that I had the opportunity to be with my grandfather, and these are 5 lessons that I've kind of, as I went into the new year this year, that I really reminded myself. And one of the biggest things was I really needed to re-energize my Bhavana, which is my imagination, and really imagine the possibilities if I let myself be. So what was fascinating is, so if we all kind of reflect back on the last year or the last 11 months, one of the most interesting things, and I know it's not one of those times we all want to fondly go back and remember, but I want us to pause here for a second. Last year, when, I saw this article by Melinda Gates, and it came out in November. And last year, when we remember when the whole world was in crisis, everyone was struggling. And all of you can remember that the sacrifices, the shifts, the changes, what your new normal became when you kind of went into that time frame. And when this article of Melinda Gates came out, I remember, by November, I was exhausted. I was trying to literally hang in there by thread and stay as positive as I can, but juggling work, 3 kids, and everything else that was going on. And so what I liked about this article was that what Melinda Gates brought to our attention was that, and since you're all women in data science, was the fact, and the numbers showed that when schools and childcare centers closed because of COVID-19, and a lot of you are also caretakers for your parents and could be your siblings, but you also take care and support your family members, that when the world was in crisis, we saw a very common pattern emerge. Women had to step up. Women had to make sacrifices. Some left the workforce to take care of responsibilities to support their children. Some of them had to go part-time, or many of you, including myself, we truly did what we would call a juggling act and stepped up as superwomen in this time frame. And what's interesting is what this showed us and put light on is that our economy pre-COVID is really built on women's unpaid labor. So as women in the workforce, for all those things that you do that aren't part of your job at work, but what you're responsible for never gets appreciated or unpaid. And so the first step of it that I ask all of you to do is, one, give yourselves a pat on the back. The second is, it really is about stating the fact and giving it a name, which is, we've got to recognize women. We've got to respect them for what they have done, and really, and actually acknowledge them for the amazing work that they're doing. They deserve that recognition. And so, a huge round of applause to all of you on this call. And it's sad that I can't see everybody in person, but I hope you all know that if there's anything you take away from this is that you stepped up, you led when the world was in crisis, and that you should be so proud of whatever you've been able to accomplish today. And then as I transition to this next one, and this was a very recent article that I read, and as I share this, and I've given you kind of that story of what we just talked about and what we were all experiencing, and this is what the numbers show. So in December, and this was since April, so in April we saw a huge shift, as I mentioned, when the world went into crisis where women were leaving the workforce and we were seeing an impact. But there was an analysis done by the National Women's Law Center, and they showed that women accounted for 100% of the 140,000 jobs that were shed by the US economy in December. Now, as I say this, I know this is shocking, but let me add to this. Well, in December 2020, women actually lost 156,000 jobs, while men gained 16,000. And so the fact that we showed 100%, if I kind of talk to their holistic numbers, the real statistics is that we were close to 111% of the jobs lost in December, and that impacted women. These statistics are crazy. And so as you think about what you've been able to accomplish, and when the world was in crisis, if we just move forward to today, what I want to really kind of help you all think about is that when in our DNA, we have it in ourselves, and it's ingrained to be able to acclimate to change. You all learned that, especially during the pandemic. COVID-19, from a business standpoint, transformed. It worked like a time machine. It took 2030 and brought it to 2020. And so in the midst of that, every company had to figure out how to transform. And the crux of all of that was more importantly, that change needed to be ingrained into their DNA. They needed to figure out how to be more agile. They needed to figure out how to acclimate. They needed to innovate at an accelerated pace. They needed to move faster. And if you think about our capability and skills as females in technology and females in the workplace, this is us. This is our time. The world is transforming. When the world was in crisis, women stood up. That's what we heard from the facts. And the data shows that, if you look at over history and, everywhere you look, women have existed in every point of success, whether it was a male being recognized, we're behind the scenes and we play a role in it. Now we're out of the shadows. And if you look anywhere, it's amazing. We have a female leader in the White House. We have women playing professional sports. We have women coaches now in the NFL. and if you look at NASA's most recent mission to Mars, there were 7 amazing women that I would have loved to share their pictures. But we have 7 amazing women that have been responsible for that. And so if you think about that, diversity leads to innovation. And when you have women in critical roles in leadership, as well as part of teams, we actually drive better results. And when we looked at, as I mentioned, everything that's happening around us, this is our time. And so I ask you all to continue to think about those things that I asked you to hold on. And then I'm going to dig a little bit deeper as we talk about women in data science. As I talk about all of you as women in your roles and functions, if you take the time to think about data, right, as we look at it, what 2020 has taught us is that data is truly the strategic asset for a business today. During these uncertain times, one thing we've observed is that no business is immune to sudden changes. Everyone had to pivot. And during these unprecedented times, a lot of companies, as I talked about before, have had to figure out new levels of agility for businesses to really deal with this, with disruption in the world. And they've established that when you embrace data, they're able to establish their culture and capabilities as an organization or as a business to be more agile, to be able to predict and pivot as needed to support their customer bases. And so if we look at today's realities, that isn't easy, what I just said, to do. And I think all of you in data science are very familiar with it. But I want to just put some things in perspective. So when you think about the volume, variety, and velocity of data, and how they're all accelerating dramatically, and the complexity of creating, the complexity of creating an enterprise knowledge graph is not that easy. In fact, the IDC predicts that by 2025, so in 4 years from now, the world's data will climb to 175 zettabytes. Now, I want to put that in perspective. So what does that really mean? So if we were to store data on a stack of Blu-ray discs, and if you stacked them up, you'd actually be able to go to the moon and back 23 times. That is the amount of data that will be available. And so without the right people, so without you in place, and to be able to process that, to figure out what that means and help translate these common questions that businesses are asking themselves. And I don't want to read through all of it that you see on the screen. It's going to be really difficult for them to figure out what to do. And so what the data shows us is that the benefits of having the right data is that it's very significant and profound for companies. And the Harvard Business Review found that the data that you see on the slide is that organizations that embrace data to drive transformational experiences will grow 54% in revenue, 44% in faster time to market, 62% improvement in their customer satisfaction, and 54% in profit results. And this is based off a significant study in comparison to all of their peers. And so the stakes are high for every company and every organization today. And ultimately, the core of their success is data. And so if I had to sum up and summarize kind of what we've been talking about a little bit today, I want to kind of bring you back to where we started. I asked you all to imagine a point in time where you were where you had your biggest dreams. And I know a lot of you shared those dreams. Now you take in addition to that, I want us to come back to where we are today. I want you to remember that little girl or boy that you were when you had those big dreams. And I want you to think about the fact that data tells the story that we've known all along. I talked about how, the value of data today and where it's accelerating and propelling. So as women in data science, the power is in your hands. across the planet, we are seeing, well, we've seen women step up and lead the way in the midst of a crisis. They've helped everyone survive. So that's a great sign. And then we're seeing women around us shatter that glass ceiling, break the walls and that are around them in the boxes that they've been put. And we're seeing change happen. But I want to ask every single one of you that as you think about what you want to accomplish, as you take one lesson away from this, from this keynote, I want you to really think about the things that you want to be able to do and achieve. And then what I also want to remind you of is that the way the world has changed today and how it's been impacted, change is going to continue to accelerate. The world is going to need to continue to transform and move faster than it's moving today. Who better to do this than every single one of you? And what I'm going to ask all of you is that I think it's our time to step out of those shadows. It's our time to work together. And it's our time to lead and change the world. And so I ask you a very simple question. Are you ready to simply imagine with me? Thank you guys for giving me an opportunity. And Madeline, I know I'm going to hand it back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bhavna. That was amazing presentation. And thank you so much for all of the pieces of advice that you shared with us. So guys, I want to encourage everyone to submit their questions for Bhavna here in the chat, and we're going to take them one by one. So Bhavna, I want to start with the first question that's coming from me. You mentioned that you had hardships on your path that you reflected on later, and you realized that you're really grateful for after time. So what is one challenge or a story that you can share that was a pivot point in your career that changed your mindset or values, and how did you overcome it at the time?
Sure. So let me think. So there was a point, this was many years ago, as a part of a restructuring, I was restructured and I was reporting up to a new leader. And when the leader kind of came into this organization, I knew the organization because it was one I had just, worked with. But when the new leader came in, and I had I want to say maybe it was 10 years into my career, 11 years into my career, I can't remember, but it was that point in time where I felt like I had a good ride. I had a lot of sponsorship, and the leader that came in and it was a female, but it's fascinating. I'll talk about that in a second. But one of the things she came in and said was, she said, "Hey, I've heard a lot of, feedback about you, and I have concerns." Like, that was her initial approach. First conversation with me, she started off, and in my mind, I'm like, and she was questioning, my integrity on certain things. So I tried to seek clarity. I was trying to be curious, and let's just say that didn't go well, right? And then I remember feeling like, I've always been good in situations where people don't see eye to eye with me or have a conflict of interest. But this was like she was fundamentally challenging what I valued, like my values, my integrity. And I was like, I don't even know what the bases of it are. And she wasn't giving me the clarity. And so at that point in time, right off the bat, I think it's a horrible place to be. You have a new senior leader who's responsible for you. You've been part of a reorg, so you want to sound positive, and you don't want to be that person that's trying to jump ship because it looks like you're not happy. But then, and then at that point in time, it was a mixed emotion of someone's at work asking you these things about things that you never did, or making up stories that aren't accurate. And then you're wondering, like, who's a person going to listen to, you or the senior leader? And she's also been with this company a long time. And I remember feeling at that point in time, like, I have to leave Microsoft. Like, I can't, what am I going to do here? And I will say I'm super grateful of, the allies I had within the company. They weren't in that organization, but within the company, that I felt like I could talk to. I was super grateful. Like, having a psychologist for a husband doesn't, that also helps, because like, what's your biggest fear with this? So she wants to fire you, then what, you always have options. And it was amazing at that point in time to think about, you know what, I do have options. So why am I afraid right now? Like, why is this bothering me? And I will tell you what I realized was why I was so scared was I'd been with the company for a good period of time, and it had been a while since I had looked for a job. So I don't think I had an updated resume. I didn't feel like I was ready, and I hadn't taken the time, more importantly, to really assess my worth and my skills. And so when I went through the motions of, I worked on my resume, and then I started putting myself out there, and I realized, you know what? Other people do think, I have some value. And it was fascinating. And I didn't last in that job long, but it was like 2 months later, I found my own job and I found a better opportunity. But what I walked away from that was I doubted myself at that point in time. I felt like a little child where I knew what I had accomplished, but somehow I lost focus of it because someone is telling me something that wasn't accurate or true and had a misrepresentation, and I let them, have power over, what I could control. And I think that shift in that mindset, and I will tell you, when I reflect back on that journey, what you specifically asked me, why I appreciate it is it forced me to pause and really get intentional. It helped me revisit my whole brand and identity and really manage it. And I will say, after that experience, I've stayed on top of it. I've never, like, if anything happens now, overnight, I'm ready. I'm always ready now. There's no more letting someone else control my destiny.
Yeah.
But that's a critical piece that we've got to remember is a lot of times when we feel paralyzed and we feel like we don't have a choice is out of fear. And it's processing and working through what's that worst case scenario and that fear of the unknown. And so the more we tackle it head on, the better the opportunity.
That's so true. You have to know your worth. And even in the moments where you doubt in yourself, you need to come back to, your internal peace and realize how great you are. So let me jump on the next question. How we can communicate the leadership, what we as women in data science do, bring value to the table beyond knowledge and skills?
So I think that's a great question, right? Which is a lot of times you get put in a box, which is, so people today see me only in my job of today. It's like they forgot that I've been in the field. I've done so many field-based roles. And it's similar to you, right? Which is when someone hears data science, they see you as the person that is going to give them insights and analyze data. It's like you got put in a box. But the reality, based on everything I told you just now, right, is one, as a female in this space, you bring more, there's a lot of skills that you bring to the table when it comes to the combination of data. And I also want to say, in the world that we live in today, empathy is huge. Like, we have needed to show up as leaders from a level of empathy. We've had to show up in empathy in the workplace, empathy with, what our children are experiencing, what our customers are experiencing. So it falls in all aspects, and that's innate and ingrained in a lot of you as leaders. And so that combination of the data tells only one side of the story, but the strategy and the thought process that needs to go beyond it, you've got to be able to tell it. And one of the things that I will tell you, and I've been working through this myself, so it's still a journey and I'm not saying it's perfect, is that being able to land the value and tell your story beyond the realm of what shows up in a resume or what people see in a short window is really up to you. I remember, many years ago, I spent a lot of time working with women coming back into the workforce after have taken, a time off to be caretakers and mothers. And so, they were like, I don't know what skill I have. I've not been in the market for 10 years. And I tell folks, like, it's about you connecting the dots for someone else versus someone else connecting the dots. And so I say, as a mother, you have the most excellent negotiation skills and sales skills. If you can convince a child to eat broccoli, I'm just saying, you have that down. And then if you think about all the things you juggle in life when you're managing kids or you're taking care of families, right? you have the innate skill to be able to project manage, whether you're a project manager or not. And so you've got to be able to talk about the things that you do and how much capability you bring to the table outside of your education, the things that people see right off the bat, and you've got to be able to bring that forward. And so that is my biggest thing that I would say is and I will say, like, women that come out of that workforce that have been mothers and kind of come back in, the ones that I have worked with, it's amazing to see, one, they're happy to be around adults, and two, the amount of the things that they can juggle and tackle and be able to bring forth, and the way that they ramp up and onboard is fascinating. And so I don't think you should ever think that holds you back. And I don't feel like women that are coming back into the workforce should even take a step back from where they used to be. The world has changed so much that regardless of when you join, you're always coming into a place where you will be the first doing something. Jobs are changing. I mean, all of the jobs that existed a year ago are definitely not the jobs you do today. Everything you all do today is not exactly the same as you did it pre-COVID. And so just remember that. And I think it's, important for you all to be able to tell that story yourself as well.
Yeah, you're so right. Everything is changing, and certainly having the two lives, the life of a mom and the professional life, are complementing each other. One makes you better in the other.
Right.
So Tyler has a question, and he wants to know, how have the people around you inspired you to become a transformation leader and pushed you to be better every day? How do you do the same for them?
So I will say, I know we have a couple of folks from my team that are on this call as well. I think, for me personally, as an individual, I'm all about, you set the bar and then you choose to break it, right? Like, you keep looking to go higher and higher, and you've got to, if you stop evolving and you stop changing, then you're done, right? Like, that's the way the world works today, right? You're in one day and you can be out the next day, regardless of the size of the company or what it is. And it's the same in your own profession and your careers. And so as I look at my career, I want to be able, I am very intentional about new experiences. I'm intentional about trying to do things differently and revisiting what we've already done and looking at what can we do better, and kind of that iterative process of, and I know Microsoft is foundationally, we look at growth mindset as it's how we drive our culture and transformation. And I do think that's innate. I know it's in all of the school systems today, and that concept of growth mindset. And so if you take that into perspective, it's about that iterative approach and how can you be better at what you're already doing today. And if you take that, and if I look at everybody that works for me, a lot of them know, till you tell me, like, Bhavana, I really don't want you to keep pushing me. I'm going to keep, looking at ways for them to embrace that potential that I see. And this goes back to that same learning that I shared from my grandfather, is it's easy for us to believe in others and see their potential and capability. And that's one thing I'm always committed to as a leader, as an ally, as a sponsor, as a mentor, as a coach, is that I'm always going to give you that honest opinion, and really help you see that potential you have in yourself. And so, and now, as I mentioned, I'm actively working on doing that more for me, which I have work to do, but that's a big piece for me, is everybody I've had an opportunity to work with over the years, I think will at least be able to attest to the fact that, one thing that I will try my best to do is to continue to help grow folks as leaders, as people, whatever that is. That is super important for me as I look to support folks.
Your team is lucky to have you. So Sophie has a question on what data is missing currently, and should we start what type of data we should start collecting to help better understand the power of women in the workforce.
So I think some of the numbers I just shared with you in itself are amazing. And, it's interesting. We have a follow-up. Microsoft is hosting Microsoft Include. It's a free event, so all of you are welcome to attend it. It's on March 17th, and it's on March 17th. And one of the things that we are actively working on is pulling together the data. This is where and if anyone wants to help us, feel free to reach out to me directly, because we love the insights. But what we are really trying to do an analysis of it is all of the areas. So we talk about the facts and the impact to women right now. And there's also, over the last 5 years, we made significant progress in seeing women rise in leadership roles in C-suite, in board positions for companies, as well as in leadership roles within organizations. COVID has significantly dropped that number now. And it's going to take us, I can't remember, I don't know, 2070 or something like that, to make up for that 5-year growth we made because of COVID. So if we don't change something soon, that's going to continue to get worse every time something like this could happen. And so the data exists. It's about us telling the story. So we are actively looking to collect that information to be able to tell that story over the next few months. And so I don't have all the data right now, but what we're looking to showcase is the impact it's had. We want to do a little bit more of analysis of the how did women rise over the last 5 years? I know a lot of companies are being very intentional now in ensuring that they commit to seeing an increase in women and minorities in leadership roles and in senior positions. Board positions are all looking to drive diversity. And so I think we've got to continue to challenge and push, continue to be curious, continue to learn. And actually, as like I mentioned, and I appreciate that question, let's bring that data to the light. And because data can work, it's all about how you represent the data. So data gets shown in very different ways, especially when I showed you that Fortune article where it said, women attested to 100% of the jobs lost. What they didn't show was that the number was higher and that men actually gained jobs in the midst of this crisis. And so we've got to start telling the story. We've got to start showing more truths, and there's power to it. And so I think the more that we can get that out there, the more we'll be able to enable women.
Yeah, and I think that those numbers are frightening. And yes. What is your speculation of that number being so high? Is it because women are more considered as caregivers, or there's something else that you think it's affecting the numbers?
No, I truly think it's that foundational impact of they are the caretakers, right? The number one, if you look at what Melinda Gates kind of highlighted in her article, as well as women stepped up. I mean, both men and women are home, no one's traveling. And I don't want to stereotype it, but I'm just going based on what the numbers show, right? I know there are many men that stepped up, and I kudos to them. But what I want to really highlight is what the numbers show us, which is women had to make the biggest sacrifice. Women had to be the ones, if the choice came, it was women that had to make the change. And so in this scenario with COVID has actually amplified when it comes to a situation like this. Women still have to play that role, and it's not a shared accountability. And so until we change that, until we start, and a lot of, I know at least at Microsoft, we're looking to do this. We are starting to look at flexible options in situations like this, because we want women to continue to stay in the workforce and feel confident that they have the ability to juggle what's happening in their personal lives as well as work. And so I think as we look towards the future, all companies are going to have to do things differently in equipping and enabling women to be successful in times like this as well.
That is true. I don't know if we have any more time for questions. I think we're running out of time. Unfortunately, we have so many questions. Maybe we can take one with very short answer. So a person is sharing that she's a mother of 4 months old and works full time. What do you suggest mothers of young child needs to do to maintain career and personal life balance?
So I love that question. So when I adopted all 3 of my kids, and when my son was born, let's just say it was a very quick adoption process. So I went from starting my adoption process, and 8 weeks later, I had a newborn. And I didn't even think I was getting a newborn, because we had said, any child, older children were in our categorization of consideration. And so I went from not being prepared to I was the mother of a newborn child. And I remember someone at work who worked for me, he said, well, Bhavna, I know your career has been great, but it's going to slow down. And I don't know why, but that pissed me off at that point in time. And I know he said it with so much love. Um, but that statement was like, why should my career be sacrificed? Because I have a baby, you have to all remember that I am a mother first, regardless of everything that's happened in my career. Those that know me know my children are super important to me. But what was super important at that point in time when I had to make a choice and a decision was I learned the importance of setting boundaries. And so I worked for someone that worked in the West Coast. And actually, since my son was born, I've had 2 other kids after that. I have 3 of them. I've had so many shifts in my role. I've had my son is 11 years old, and I've had 9 different jobs in that 11 years. So I've had a lot of leaders I've worked for across the US and globally. And the thing that I will give you the best advice is you've got to set what's priority for you. Every company will, if you're willing to work, will happily take it. But I remember telling them, I said, hey, my son's young. Between 4 o'clock Eastern time and 7 o'clock Eastern time, I'm not going to be available for calls. I'll do it if there's a crisis or a situation. But if you are hosting meetings and you're having anything that's pre-planned, I'd like you to work around it. Now, he managed a lot of people that were in a lot of time zones, but I was the only one that set that expectation at that point in time. And I looked at it as worst case, they'll say no. I mean, what have I got to lose? But to this day, everyone has worked within that boundaries of what is important to me. And I've even actually left a very big meeting that I got invited to as an add-on, as a +1 for a big executive meeting. And it was kind of a leadership development program because it was my son's first Mother's Day tea at his preschool. And I didn't know how to say it, but I was like, I'm going to leave. Like, I have to be there. And I remember the senior executive at the time, he actually highlighted it to that whole audience of leaders and showcased. He said, I'm really pleased. I just want you all know that Bhavna is going to be not available for the next 2 days because she's going to go back home because she's going to do her Mother's Day tea. And he said, I apologize that we didn't consider that this meeting was around Mother's Day. I mean, that was amazing to hear. And I will say that now, it could have been a different situation. A different leader could have done something different, but I felt good of my choice. And so remember that when you get sick, it's not going to be work that's going to take care of you. It's going to be your family. At the end of the day, when you've lived your life, it's not your job, it's your family. And so always prioritize your family, prioritize your well-being, and you can still be the best in your career when you have that balance.
Thank you, Bhavna. That's so inspiring. I'm sorry, guys, but we are out of time, so we need to close today's session. But thank you, Bhavna, for being here today. Thank you for your support for WITS. That was an amazing presentation. So thank you for all of the pieces of wisdom that you shared with us. And I wish everyone good luck in your careers. Thank you for joining today's panel. Sorry. Thank you for joining today's keynote session. And I wish you a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you all.